I'm really happy to be here today with Ulysses of Music, Meaning, and Mystery. I got introduced to Ulysses through Drew. We did the episode on Drew's ecology when talking about music, ethnomusicology. And so Ulysses contacted me and told me about some of his interests in music, and I thought it would be really fun to get together and have a talk. So welcome, Ulysses.
Thank you.
And we usually get started by having a guest tell a little bit about their background. So I'd really enjoy getting to know you a little bit better before we springboard into the whole music world.
Okay, let's narrow it down because it could be a pretty big story. So, background in music specifically, or?
Well, a little bit about maybe where you grew up and then what got you interested in music and then what you have done musically. That would be good.
Okay. I grew up in the Maritimes in Canada, so that's on the Atlantic Ocean coast. So, it's a series of small provinces that are clumped together as the Maritimes in the psychocultural kind of mind of Canada. Like most people, you say the, I'm from the East Coast, and they say, "Oh, Toronto," and but there's no coast there. And so I always want to just kind of slap them because the rest of Canada exists. So that tells you a little bit about kind of where I'm from. I grew up in an Acadian village, so the east coast of Canada was settled semi simultaneously by the English and the French. The French first, and then the English shortly thereafter. Um, and the Acadians there kind of developed their own dialect in order to deal with having to speak with the First Nations and the English. So it's like we're French, but we're our own thing.
Is that where we get the word Cajun?
Yeah,
Cajun?
exactly. So when the
So, Ulysses, could you crank your sound up just a little bit? It feels like you're a little bit on the soft side.
yeah, just did.
Oh,
How's
that's
that?
much better. Yeah, that's much
Okay.
better.
So yeah, actually, so the Cajuns, when the English won the war in 1755, were deported from the southeast New Brunswick and Nova Scotia area, and many of them were put on boats, um, and eventually some of them ended up in America, and that's where the Cajuns come from.
Hmm.
And a lot of the names, the family names, kind of are the same: Leblanc and Léger and Gauguin and so forth. So that's where I'm from. But my grandfather's English, so I'm of the two. The two, it was kind of like a taboo relationship a little bit. My grandmother would go to Nova Scotia to work in lobster shops, and she was a French girl, and she fell in love with my grandfather, and he came to her French village to have a family. So I'm a I'm a I'm an Acadian, but I have an English name, which is in from my area. It's nobody knows what to make of you, right? uh, Especially when the cultural identities are divided on linguistic lines like that. So yeah, so that's where I'm
Well, so
from.
did that affect you growing up at all? I mean,
Yeah,
being
well,
being
on
kind of one of a kind, let's say.
yeah, no, that's definitely, and it's a bit of a theme in my life, like of two worlds a bit, or a lot. And well, so when I would work with Acadian guys, I was always that guy with the English name, right? Like I even went to like a concert of an Acadian band. It was like a very important kind of cultural moment. It was their like goodbye concert. The band is called 1755. So it's like about the deportation, right?
Hmm.
And I went to that because I love music, and I was kind of steeped in that whole Acadian uh, like geography. And so I went to that as a really big cultural moment, and it's like family. It's about family because we share family names, right? So so when the vibe was really high about this, like this is our nation, and we don't have borders, but we are a nation, and you know, we will not be assimilated, kind of a party, right?
Mhm.
And so everybody would go around and say, what's your last name? Right? And I didn't have the presence of mind to lie to them. Right? So it was awkward. Like it was never like a bad hostile thing, but it was awkward. They didn't quite know what to make of, like, why is this English guy at our thing, right? You're actually the guy, the opponent that we're creating an identity around, right? So, and then when I would work with English people, I would have an accent, and they could tell. So I was the French guy, right? So I was never like,
Well, so how did you get rid of the accent?
well, for those people with a keen ear, you'll hear the accent. And just I've been speaking English a long time. I moved to Vancouver. And then now I'm in the Okanagan, BC interior. And my wife's the other way around. She's grew up English, but yeah, she has a French name.
Hmm.
But we speak mostly English, and English is the language of business, and you know, so you just like kind of assimilate.
Hmm.
Yeah, to my shame.
Well, so I'm sorry I derailed your discussion there. So
No, not at all.
you were growing up in that environment, and then you got interested in music.
Yeah, well, if you want to add a layer to that that's relevant to your show, on top of that, being the weirdo linguistically and genealogically, is that a word?
Yeah.
Uh, I was also a Jehovah's Witness. I grew up, my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness now, but this is like a small town, Acadian village. uh, the, I was sticking out in all of the ways, you know? So that's kind of relevant. This is another kind of layer in that theme of you're always in between things. You're never quite one thing. And the music was just all the boys in my family all played guitar and or mandolin or something. And all my dad's uncles were all storytellers, and Acadians like music. They like to party. They like to drink beer and listen to music, and so it was always around. Um, yeah, so I just naturally kind of there was a guitar around, and I wanted to learn because that's a thing that people did. So that's how I picked up the music bug.
How many siblings did you have?
So I have three brothers and a sister. Yeah.
Wow, so a big family, five of your
And
kids.
plus, this is another layer. So it's the youngest was 12 when I was born. So there's like a four, that's one layer of family sediment, and then like
Mhm.
an era
Yeah.
where everything changes. You know, my parents convert to this very strange religion for for the area, and then me. So it's a very like it's almost like step family in a way.
Yeah, I get that. I have two daughters that are 24 years apart. So
Yeah, so you know all about that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
Yep.
mean, you know each other. You know each other because there's that bond. There's that bond. You know, it's we have the same parents that died, but I don't really know what they're up to, and they don't really know what I'm up to. And it's like the picture I have of them is incomplete, and the inverse is true also. It's very difficult to bridge that.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very
Well, I
difficult.
mean, in
Plus,
many ways, you grew up in two different generations as well, because
yeah,
12
that
years
too.
makes a huge difference. So
We grew up in two different religions.
yeah.
It's like it's a big deal. Yeah, I haven't
They
cracked
say
the
that
code.
no child ever grows up in the same in the same home. you can have 10 kids and every one of them grew up in a different home because
Right.
each time a new child is born, that changes the dynamic in the home. So even if nothing else changed, the dynamic would be different as each child comes along.
Hmm.
And the parents deal differently with each child because they've grown and changed. And, so in your case, you had many layers added onto that. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, like my first forays into figuring out my own relationship to music were informed because I was a weirdo in high school, in more ways than one, but musically speaking, I didn't know what was going on really in music, New Kids on the Block or whatever. I was listening to my brother's music, Pinheads, or no, what is it? No, Headpins and Boston and Triumph and Pink Floyd, and it was all like old stuff. Like that's I was listening to what my high school peers' parents were listening to when they were kids, right?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Anyway,
Yeah. So then did you go on to study music or?
no, I'm self-taught, and that's one thing. Like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, you kind of like your educational uh, aims are like limited, prospects are limited, and it just wasn't a thought that made sense in that context of um, like you can have pursuits that are yours, really. Everything, especially, and also it's just time consuming, this lifestyle of I actually calculated one day in order to stay on top of everything, if you really do stay on top of everything, which I don't see how many people do, you would have to be dedicating at least, at minimum, 20 hours a week to it, if not 30, just to stay on top of like all the meetings and the preparation for the meetings. And I was, because I'm a man, I had a lot more responsibility in the congregation. I had to prepare for things, and it's just, how are you supposed to have like a career, right? That would be the time you would dedicate to a career.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the music education was never something, but somehow I managed to learn guitar and over a long time get good at it. Uh, get good at it enough that I felt like I could be serious about it. And then at a certain point that created a tension. Like not attention, well both I guess. Uh, Attention and tension. Um, and actually it was a bit of an activating moment for me when the elders in my congregation started to have concerns for me because of my music. And isn't there a scripture where it says it's like touching your eyeball? Like it's like uh, if when the enemies touch my people, it's like touching my eyeball. That God says, or something like that. I forget what it is, but it's like kind of a deal. It's kind of like it's a metaphor or something like that to explain like when they touch you, they're really friggin' with me. You know what I mean?
Oh, touch the apple of my eye.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
read it in French, so for me it's
Okay.
eyeball. So yeah, so the apple of the eye is like the most sensitive part of the eye, right? Well, I kind of like feel like that's what happened. Like they came for something that's very, very, very deeply central to who I am, and it kind of
And how old
asked.
were you at that time?
I was in my 20s. Yeah, I was pretty far in, man. I dedicated everything. I didn't hold back. When I went in, I went in, man. Like and and it was like, no, that's not enough. For me it was like, now you have to also not be you. And that was, I didn't think that I was gonna do that. Yeah. So yeah, so that's the music thing is has become quite important to me.
So
Um,
was that really hard to leave then? I mean, because it's
well,
all
yeah,
bound up
because
with family and friends
well,
and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like um, yes, it was very hard. One of the more difficult things I've done in my life, if not the most difficult. Yeah, because it's like they set the price. You know, they it's there's a cost. You know, and you go in, especially when you grow up in there, you just assume that's the way to go, right? Um, but I'm not sure like how much my consent was informed really, right? Like it's because it's like if you, the only thing you know, you don't really how can you make a really informed decision, right?
Mhm.
Um, anyway, that's my position on it. I don't mean to like knock on someone's life. Like I mean um, but yeah, that's the way that I see it, and I'm not lying about that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big price to pay. Big price to pay, yeah. I like after that I couldn't really be friends with my parents. Yeah, it's too bad because they died and we kind of like stopped. We didn't really know each other anymore and um
Mm.
yeah, it's yeah.
Wow. Well, do you, I'm sorry, I'm poking around at some pain points.
I'm willing to I'm willing to talk. Like it's fine. It's a
Do you still
conversation.
have a relationship with your four elder siblings then? Because they were not into it, or?
So so part of what happens is um, they all got that ahead of me because they grew up in a world where there was a Christmas, there was a Halloween, there was a you know dating before marriage, and whatever.
Uh-huh.
There was that. So for instance my brother Francis would have been like I don't know 16 or 15 years old, and it's like all of a sudden everything changes, and it's it's a big thing, a big ask,
Mhm.
to okay, we're not going to have any family traditions anymore, and you got to go to 3 meetings a week, and you got to go knock on the doors of people and differentiate, not be part of them anymore because they'll know you're not part of that community anymore. You're demarcating yourself by hi, please reject me. Like that's kind of like the it's kind of what you're doing, right? Um, so they saw the contrast, so it didn't stick with them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and but I mean, it still hurt that they couldn't have a full relationship with my parents because of that, right? So without going into like additional details, um, there's some pretty serious trauma that everyone in the family is dealing with because of that. That's I'm not sure how to heal. I'm trying to, you know, um, do what I can in the tiny little corner of influence I may have. That whatever is my responsibility, but um, yeah, that's something I think I've had to accept. Like we're going to die with that unresolved. This is not a single generation thing, and I don't
Mhm.
know other than pray and try to be a good husband, right?
Yeah.
And just the simple things and use my gifts for something good. I don't see what else. It's This is way bigger than any single person, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in that. You can't extend your boundaries beyond your boundaries. I mean, you have your limits of what you can accomplish because we can't make people think or do or feel anything.
Yeah.
It has to come. from them, but certainly praying makes a difference. I know that.
Oh yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
counting on that anyway.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
What exactly it does. There's a lot of room to discuss that, but 100%, 100%. Like I've witnessed my fair share, more than my share of miracles, uh, through prayer and other means. But uh, yeah, I had another thought about that, but I think I may be reaching my cap on that particular topic.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, so you said that you've learned a lot about music. So I'm guessing it's not just the guitar that you're interested in, but you're interested in all kinds of music, and that you had done some um, study of shamanism and how shamanism uses music as a healing process. And you also mentioned that music can be a sort of apologetic, that's something you and Drew had been talking about. Those both sound like interesting topics to me. And
Yeah.
then I wanted to throw one other thing in here to you. I don't know if you ever heard much about synesthesia,
Yes.
and is that anything you'd like to talk about? Because I'd like to understand more about that. I know somebody who says that they experience that, and it sounds absolutely fascinating. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
I think I only have one point of contact with that, which is the way that I learned to write music, compose music. Um, so whenever I've brought this up, I brought this up with one of my band guys one time, and he asked me if I was a synesthetic, and I'm not. But I realized when I finally, got into the band thing after a long time of wanting to try to make that happen, I was really excited. That's like, I'm going to go with my people, right? And I realized um, these, yeah, I'm still a weirdo here. Um, because I would get asked like, "Oh, like how did you write that song?" And it's like literally this is how I write a song. Not every time, but most of the time. Uh, at the guitar or a vocal line or at the piano, and I'll just hit on a chord progression or a rhythm or a few notes, and then that's all I need. Sometimes one chord, one thing, and you just loop it. You just keep going and keep going and keep going. And then I mumble, I sing nonsense. And just to get a sense of what's going on. And then once I've done that long enough, which is probably 10 to 20 minutes, I never timed it, but I'm guessing that's that. I start to see things. And I'll either like see them vividly in my mind, like more vivid than dreams, and or I borderline like actually see things, and then I start to my mumblings that are kind of happening by themselves. I guess it's like sort of like glossolalia.
Mhm.
I start to like drive them. I start to steer them towards actual words that describe more or less what it is that I'm seeing. Now, I had never thought about how weird that is, how not normal. At least
Well,
I,
to me, it doesn't sound weird at all, Ulysses,
well,
because that's
good.
exactly my experience of painting. That's
Well, you see
exactly
that
the
I
way
can
I
see
paint.
that because it's like you're actually it's a visual thing,
Well,
right?
but I mean, when I say that it's exactly the way I paint, I mean, I just start with paint and I just make a mess.
You go see where it goes.
Well, I'm not even seeing where it goes. I just keep making a mess. I just make a mess and I make more of a
Uh,
mess and I add more chaos and I just keep adding chaos until I see something.
okay.
And then it's like it'll like shift into place, and I can, oh, there's a figure in there, or that's a vase of flowers or something. And then I start to work with that. Because when I first started painting and I would just start with a blank canvas, I mean, it was it's like hitting my head against a stone wall, unless I was trying to copy a photograph or something,
Yeah.
in which case then you know where to start.
Yeah.
But still, you get something that's, I mean, for me, I would get something that was pretty pedantic. But if
Hmm.
I could start with this chaos, I get this rich, full background,
Yeah.
and shifting of background and foreground together so that they kind of play with each other. And yeah, so it doesn't sound weird to me at all. I mean, I can totally understand writing music that way.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. And it doesn't feel weird to me. It's just that that's how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that I would find myself in people that understood music this way. But it turns out people read music and have rules, and that they have like theory behind it, and that became very, very strange to me because I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was going to go with a band and we were going to play the visions we had. Like I wasn't literally thinking that, but part of me was kind of naive, like, okay, this is how we're going to jam. And it took a while to kind of find a way to bridge the two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while. I mean, I'm still working on it to have confidence that this is actually like a valid mode of being as a musician. And that's where that's like the only point of contact I have with synesthesia. Like I see things, but they're not associated with specific notes or anything like that. I know it can get pretty like synesthetics. It's like it's repeatable. Like they'll play a C sharp and it's always that thing they see.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a whole other thing. I don't know what that is, but that's where like shamanism comes in, and and more context appropriate, like like somebody like Saint Hildegard, right? Like has was a musician and a lot of other things, but was also like had visions, like very intense visions ever since she was a child, right? So I'm kind of drawn to those sort of artists. I guess they're visionary artists, like technically speaking, like it's a visionary. They see things. Um, so it's like I had to kind of figure out where else that was in the world to kind of get a sense of belonging in history, I guess. Um, and it's like it all the way that I stumbled on, okay, this is a thing that exists in life, was when I lost my band while we were about 75% through writing a third album, and I had like these big visions, right? And then my gear got stole, and that was it. I was never going to get that album, right? So I I decided this was an initiation, and I completely shift gears, like kind of sort of away from music, and I decided I would do a research project about music to figure out what the meaning of music was. And that took me back to a more strictly religious domain. I had been interested in, spiritual esoteric things all throughout, but I understood that the domain of meaning was a religious domain. So I was like, well, I have to understand religion then. Because if I want to understand the meaning of music, I have to understand meaning. So let's go in this religion thing. So I started with Eliade, History of Religious Ideas, and he wrote about shamanism. And so, and then, it pinballed from there.
Well, so did you hear about Eliade from Jordan Peterson, or was this completely separate from Jordan Peterson?
I probably did. But I swim in a lot of different pools. So so I
Well, so I mean,
didn't
how long ago was this research project? When did you start it?
um 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it probably
Well, so if
was
you had been
Peterson.
listening to Peterson at all, you probably would have run into his stuff,
Yeah, it's
Iliade.
probably a
Yeah.
name that was floating around in there, and I was like, let's go check that out.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah, you're probably right.
So the history of religious ideas, and then he talks about shamanism and
Well, shamanism was now. Let me disclaimer all of this. So I'm currently not beholden to any religious paradigm, specific religious paradigm. I'm just a guy on a pilgrimage. I like to say pilgrimage because you're always moving, right? You end up somewhere, but you always, you know, I'm not there, right? Um, and I don't. So whatever I may say is like if it's heretical to anybody, just understand that I bear that's the particular freedom that I have to suffer, right? Right? I'm not like I don't have that framework that a lot of people do. I'm walking.
mhm.
So as near as I can tell, shamanism, as wonky a definition as it is the best guess we have for where all of this kind of comes from. Like the way humans be, right? Which is so I kind of felt like it was important to understand that so I can understand what's a human, right? So shamans are use music or at least the cultures that carried the tradition of shamanism to us use music in a way that's that is revolutionary to me, right? To the way that I learned like music industry and chords and all that. So their view of music is so let's put in a few like columns here so we can lay a foundation a bit. Their view of illness is it's not molecules, right? It's it's your soul. It's something wrong with your soul. So they have their own stories of the fall, um, that that echo some of the stories that the bombers, would understand. The, I call the bridges of meaning. I call them the bombers because it's
Oh,
yeah.
I was wondering who were the bombers.
Uh, so when you're ill, either your soul is gone or a piece of your soul is gone, and it's lost in another world. So the way that I'm able to understand that as a modern person is I don't know if you have any experience with depression. Uh, I don't think there's a better description of what your experience is of depression. It's
Uh,
that you don't have a soul anymore. It hurts that bad. So I think they're right. at least, at least the part of it that resonates that way is right. So, and we know depression causes all sorts of other illnesses, right? So it's a bad relationship with your soul. That's what illness is to these tribes. Now I'm generalizing, but how else are you going to talk about anything without making generalizations? So they have shamans, they have people who occupy a specific role in the community. And they're the kind of the weirdos, right? They have the visions and they climb trees and yell things, and they're not like the other people. Uh, they have this special power that's achieved through initiation, an initiatory ordeal, of being able to have a vision and go find where the soul is. But one thing that struck me in learning about shamanism is that um, they can't just like take the soul and bring it back. The soul has to come back, but the soul is lost. It doesn't know its way home. This is where music comes in. So they play a beat or they sing a song, and that's what the soul recognizes when it's lost. And that's how the soul, it's like a breadcrumbs, can come back home. So this model, this idea or this reality of music is what brings your soul home. It really like changed, like really, really shifted how, like, for me, what music is. The meaning and the mystery of music. It's a medicine, but it's like not medicine like we think of it, but it's like it's bridges, makes bridges. It leads you back to where you're supposed to be. It aligns things. It heals. Makes
So
things
I don't,
whole
I
again.
don't, at the expense of atomizing this to the point where we lose the beauty of that idea, I would like to understand a little bit more about the music that the shaman is using. Is it something like each person in the tribe has a song that is their song from birth, so that it's something that will call them back? Or is there a generic village song that calls everybody back? Or
So, as I understand it, obviously, when you get granular, it's going to change by different, regions. Um, some some shamans have also just the function of singing the stories, which is has its own healing effect on the people, or singing to the gods. But to sing the soul home, as I think, if I remember correctly, it's spontaneous. So it's kind of like the musician is jamming his way to the medicine,
hmm.
right? But but I know that, for instance, some South American tribes have songs that are called icaros, and in their sacred ceremonies, they sing those songs, and those songs are their tutelary spirits. So the song itself is animated, is animate. The song itself is the person that's there to help. So kind of like I don't know, in the Christian tradition, we have saints that are tutelary. Um, it's kind of like that. They have a song that they use in their sacred ceremony. So yeah, getting granular like that is it's beyond my ability to research as a
Mm-hmm.
part-time guy at
Mm-hmm.
this point. Um,
Well, it totally makes sense though, but this whole idea of the song itself being the tutelary is so fascinating, because I wonder if that's why birds have a song and humpback whales have a song,
hmm,
because they have things that they have to do that are not anything that even within their own lifetime they have time to learn,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
they have to know their way home. They have to know
Oh,
their
that's good.
migratory path, right?
Yeah.
Um, maybe that song has something to do with, I don't know. Anyway, interesting
Huh.
to think about.
No, that's good. I like that. Anything that breaks, that pushes back on the idea of, oh, they're just singing so they can have sex with each other is, it's clearly just thinking that with that thought, I feel stupid when I think that, right? It's obviously just listen to it and you can tell there's more to it than that. You just, if you just listen, right?
Well, I mean, the whole idea that humpback whales have a 2022 song all across the planet. Every humpback whale on the planet sings a song in 2022 that is unique to 2022.
Seriously?
And next year, it will change to a new song, and every humpback whale on the planet will have the new song.
Wh-
So I don't think you can talk about that being some
What you're
evolutionary
telling
advantage.
me is that whales release singles.
Yes.
That's-
Yeah.
I did not know that. That is wild.
Well, I mean, this is what I heard, and I actually looked it up one time because I thought that's just too wild. How can that be? And I remember it being the truth. Now, maybe they've found something since then, and that's not true, but that's what I remember about humpback whales. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I mean, I just think there's so much more to all these things than the purely materialist mindset would have us believe. I mean, just the whole thing about migratory birds, that they know how to get back to some place that they've never been to before
Yeah.
because they just got born and now they have to get back there,
Yeah.
or why do salmon swim upstream when it's so deadly difficult to swim upstream,
Yeah.
when if they knew what was waiting for them was just having a baby and then dying. you know yeah, the whole thing is very puzzling. So
Agreed.
that's really interesting. That's a beautiful thought that the soul recognizes the song and finds its way home.
Well, I was watching this little clip of like a music therapy thing, and I actually had someone on my podcast, and she'll be released in the new year, I think, who does music therapy. That's as a profession, and there was this one guy that in this clip. He was an old guy, and he was. You could see he's very dejected. It was just very sad to see that guy. It's just 1,000 yard stare, kind of. And they asked him what kind of music he used to listen to, and I think he said gospel music. And so they gave him earphones, and they put some songs. It's just really, it's like he became alive. He was like a zombie that became alive again.
Mm.
He started singing and half dancing in his chair, and it's that's where it is in action. It's
Mhm.
so beautiful. I talked to a guy whose kid has got like a bad muscle problem, and he's got all the muscle tissue for slow muscle movement, but he doesn't have the fine tissue for quick. So he's confined to a wheelchair, and his dad really likes punk music, and he would play punk music and like lip sync and play air guitar, and he noticed that his kid really liked that. So he decided, I'm going to learn to play punk music, and he started to compose punk rock songs for kids. And when he would play these songs, he would play faster and faster. His little boy would be able to move faster, and so it's real. It really is real. Like there's a power in music that it's. I love to go to concerts, and I love nerding out about bands, but we got to start. We got to start surfacing this awareness that we have of music. we're behaving like we know what that is because, we go at great expense to for music, and we dedicate so much to it. And you go to a concert, it's obviously some kind of priest delivering some kind of experience, transcendent experience for an audience. But like, if we don't start to know this and start to become mature about what that really is, I think we do need to do that. Like, if it can make like a old guy with Alzheimer's or something like come alive again, it's this. We can't be children about this anymore. We got to grow up and get real about what music is, I think. Anyway, that's my whole rave.
Well, I like it. I while you were talking, this picture came into my mind. I don't know how much you followed of my channel at all, but I've done quite a few episodes on Stephen Wolfram's theory of a new fundamental physics.
Oh yeah, I tried those, but it's beyond.
Okay. Well, okay, but the basic idea is fairly simple that that space is made up of little pieces, little things like he calls them eames. You could think of them as atoms, but they're a lot smaller than an atom.
Okay.
And to start with, there's just one eame, and then that eame spreads out into three eames. Okay, this is an example of how it could be. There could be any number of rules, but let's just take this rule for one. Spreads out into three eames, and then wherever there's that vision right there of these three eames, it will take one. So there's three eames, and then there's three nodes. I mean, there's three nodes. An eame is like a node in a graph, and then there's three edges. So you
So
can
so an
imagine.
eam is made up of three things.
No, no, no. Let's just say I've got three eames here. Okay,
Okay.
three eames.
Yep.
Now, those three eames are going to be connected by three edges.
Okay.
It's a graph.
And that's like a structure of the universe or something?
Well, this is the beginning structure of the universe.
Okay.
Now, wherever you have this structure, the rule says take one of these things right here, and out of this, you spring out a new structure like this. So you take this one edge and you
Okay.
turn it into another three thing.
So each edge is made up of eames that are connected to edges themselves. So it's like a
The whole
fractal
thing
thing.
starts turning out this big graph
Okay.
that's made up of eames and nodes. I
Okay.
mean, eames and edges, nodes and edges. You just get this big graph made up of nodes and edges. It's over time, it starts to make structures that actually look like things, which is very peculiar and very mysterious. And that's why
Okay.
you started to think maybe there's something here about the way the universe is constructed. So there's a lot to this theory, and I'm only just giving you the very top note. But the point is, musical notes are very much like an eame. They're a note, they're a node in a graph.
Okay.
And when you have a melody, it's a linear graph, right?
Okay.
Have the notes on the keyboard, and your melody might go up and down, and then it might go along, and then it kind of goes up, and whatever the melody does, it's just a linear graph.
Uh-huh.
But if I think about like a symphony, that's like an n-dimensional graph. That's it's multiple dimensions all at one time in a symphony, because you have all these different melodies and harmonies and rhythms all interplaying with each other and creating this like matrix of music. And so it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that this musical matrix kind of inhabits our matrix. It kind of meshes with the matrix that makes up me, right? So this music actually is participating in me, and I am participating in the music.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what's the eam made of?
Well, he says his idea is most people say space is just a place that we inhabit,
Okay.
right? I mean, I'm in a room. This room is made up of space. It's
Right.
just an it's room, just room to move around in.
Uh-huh.
But he says space is actually these little particles. these little eames, and that time is the updating of these events. Every time the graph changes, every time it updates, that's a movement of time. So there are movements of time through space, and that begins to grow the graph bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex over time.
Huh.
So space is these little discrete particles, and time is the updating of events.
But like it's space is all of the particles?
Yes.
Okay. So
All
the
of the
reason
particle, the graph that contains all of these particles is space.
okay. So the reason I'm asking like what's the E made of cuz you compare the eam to an individual note,
Yeah.
and then a series of notes would be the graph,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you so that's like 2D flat land, and then
Mm-hmm.
when you kind of extract 3D is multiple phrases of music, if you want to put it that way,
Sure.
or 5-part harmony or something like that.
Yeah.
But then like I've been thinking about like single notes lately because I had somebody like multiple times try to explain to me uh so so y the verticality of music. So like she's saying we write horizontally. Happy birthday to you, and it goes this way. But ha each thing stop and stay there, and you'll find that it's not a point, it's its
Oh, yeah,
own
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sphere. So and I couldn't figure that
Because
out.
of all the overtones, you mean?
That's definitely a part of it, right? Now, being a guitarist, you can kind of figure that out because and I was sort of there because I was in a drone band, so we were exploring a lot of like staying in this chunk of it would be like one thing, one note, one key, one chord. It was just like and just expand and make it into a blob rather than a static chunk like this chord. But that's still multiple. That's still like 3D. But I finally figured out in singing because I've been focusing on singing more, and especially throat singing. You can do a lot more overtones by like manipulating your mouth parts and stuff. So that's why I was asking like what is there like a correlate. I'll have to like listen to that whole thing to try to figure out what it is, but is there a correlate between that idea of a note and the eam itself, which is its own fractal, or is an eam made of eames, or I don't know what's.
Well, that's a really interesting idea. In his ecology, I think that the one thing that he did say, he was having a working conference that one of the interesting things about Wolfram is he puts everything on YouTube, even if it's just him talking to some of his colleagues, trying to figure out some little nitty gritty thing in the theory.
Okay.
He'll put that on YouTube and you can listen to it.
Hmm.
Now, most of what they're talking about, I don't understand, but I put it on in the background and I kind of half listen to it. And then if something pops up and I go, oh, yeah, I get that.
Right.
So they're having one of these working conferences and they're talking about it. And this other um, fellow that's talking with him says, well, Stephen, we know for a fact that every eam has to be unique. And then he goes on to explain why. It's a philosophical thing and also a physical thing. That
Okay.
that if some of the eames were identical to one another, the whole universe would collapse
Okay.
because they would all line up in one.
Okay.
So each eam has to be unique.
Hmm.
Okay, that in itself tells me that it's more than just like one dimensional. If it has some particularity to it,
Oh, I see.
that
Oh, I see.
that
So not it's
identifies
not
it from all the other eames.
right. It's not like eam carbon copy eam. It's not
Yes,
like a building block or a brick, or it's
no,
like a thing
every
that's
eame
alive.
is particular,
Oh, I see.
right? So
Okay, that's
it's similar
different.
as when Jonathan Peugeot is always talking about the universe being made up of unity and multiplicity. In my art framework, I think of that as if I take all the elements and principles of art and all of the combinatorial explosion that can come out of that and try to simplify it down to the very basic so that I have something I can hold on to, I just think unity with variety,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
unity and multiplicity is very similar to that.
Yep.
Jonathan talks about the structure of the universe being a structure of unity and multiplicity.
Uh-huh.
Then that multiplicity isn't just whole, it isn't just take the unity and chop it up all into equal parts and they're
Uh-huh.
all indivisible and they're all the same thing. No, that multiplicity is a multiplicity of unique entities, right?
I recently, I don't know. At some point, I learned that the etymology of the word heal is to make whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been a lot on this medicine thing, this healing thing, like how it's like there's something fundamental about healing. And that seems to be overlapping with what you're saying. It's the the various parts different from me. I kind of think about it as a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like this part and that part is not in good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's illness. And then so they're separate. They're not whole. They're to heal is to make whole. So that's like the serpent on the pole, Moses points, echoes with Jesus on the cross,
Mm-hmm.
medicine, heal, make whole, you know, isn't, and there's like some sort of resonance between Jesus on the cross and the lid of the Ark of the Covenant, because the lid covers over the sins or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it brings back together what was put apart, like was split apart by, I guess, like Satan, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's separation from God. Heal. It
Well,
just
one of the way that it talks about it in the New Testament is that the the cross of Christ tears down the dividing wall that
yeah.
divided us, right, from one
Yeah.
another.
Okay.
So when you have a division and you get rid of that division, then wholeness can take place again
Yeah.
by itself, right?
So can I ask you a question about that? Because you're gonna know a lot more than me because you've been more steeped in, like, as far as I can tell, the general Christian world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like I have like a lot of healing healing to do, right? And it's part of the reason why I dove back into this, because I had a mildly um, hostile relationship to religion, like institutions and stuff. And until when I started reading about religion, and it like just kind of expanded that whole idea of what it is, and then I realized that thought is is me letting my experience of religion continue lording over what I think of religion. So I'm still getting dominated by this old thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to liberate myself. So I decided, what if I don't take a hostile position towards religion in general? So the whole make whole thing in Christianity is a promise that's obviously appealing to me. But when I go in churchy related Christian spheres, I can kind of feel the edges, the boundaries are really, really close. Like, not as much as the way I grew up, right? But I don't understand how like each eam can fit in there by being its own eam, because what I see is, I don't know if it's like a temperamental thing or something. I see you can fit in, but you have to be like us. That's what I see, right? I know I'm wrong, right?
Well,
Because
I don't think you're wrong. I mean, I think that you're going to run into a lot of churches that are like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the majority of churches are like that.
so what
Where-
what happened if the promise is,
Well,
if it's coming from a God that's doing the opposite of that? I don't understand.
well, so what do you think of when you think of sin?
I would say that's what it is. It's a separation. It's it's again, it's that bad relationship, um well, with God, I guess.
Yeah, it's a broken relationship with God, right? And partly the reason it's a broken relationship with God, if I read Eve correctly, um, she listened to the serpent because it gave her a way to be in control. I mean, I think everybody wants to be in control. That's at the base of, in my mind, all sin arises out of pride.
Oh, because
If you eat this piece of fruit,
yeah,
you
yeah,
will
yeah,
be like God. You will know the difference between good and evil.
yeah, I get it. It's like God is saying a thing, but if I don't test it out, then it I can't completely grasp it. I don't have it.
Well, and also, if I know that, if I know good and evil, then I don't need God, right? Then I'm in his place. Why not? I mean, that when the Bible talks about Satan, it says that he was the leader of the worship team in heaven. What he
Whoa.
was before he
Oh, right,
fell,
right, 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 right,
right?
right, right.
Yeah. So, but he didn't want to just be the leader of the worship team. He wanted to be the one. And I think what happens even in church, even when okay, this is a big question, so I'm going to stumble over it, and I'm sure I'm going to say things that sound heretical and everything else, but I'm just going to explain it the way that I understand it. That being a Christian is not a matter of knowing a lot of facts and propositions and being able to state them correctly and fitting into a box somewhere, but it's being in relationship with Christ and being a part of his body, because he is the head and we are the body. So being a part of his body means being in relationship with all these other imperfect humans that inhabit the church.
Mhm.
And we're all imperfect and we rub each other the wrong way. And part of that is a good thing, because when somebody's rubbing you the wrong way, they're rubbing off all your rough spots. And so if you can submit to that, and if you can learn from all these difficult relationships, you can see where your own rough spots are, and you can allow Christ to work on those. And he continues to pour his grace into us and offer us his mercy. So, in the midst of that, each one of us individually, if we are, and I'm not trying to attribute too much power to self, but if we are kind of willing, if we're in this space where we're willing to be transformed, in spite of how painful it can sometimes be, then in relationship with one another, we help each other with this process. Sometimes, because we're imperfect beings, people get hurt in the process of that. And sometimes you get into some churches where people are maybe not walking in faith at the moment. And so they begin to express their desire to have power over others, and they see people who are vulnerable. And that means that it's easy to have power over them. And one of the ways it's easy to have power over them is to tell them what to do and tell them what's right and what's wrong. And when I was a new Christian, been a believer for about 2 years, my husband and I felt like we were called to the mission field. So we went to the university to get the mission said we had to get master's degrees in teaching English as a second language if we wanted to be effective in Asia. So we went to the university to get these master's degrees. And at the university, there was this young church on campus, all filled with students, and they were praising the Lord. And it was such an exciting place to be. And the teaching was so deep and profound. And we got involved with this church. And after we'd been in this church for about 3 or 4 months, we started to notice that there was something a little off. The elders of the church, one of their mantras was that every man should desire to be an elder and every woman should desire to be the wife of an elder, which at the moment doesn't sound too bad until you realize that in the scripture, it details all the characteristics of an elder and the characteristics of a wife of an elder. So then they had a list of things they could hold you accountable to. And if you didn't measure up to that, they would disfellowship you from the church. So everybody's walking around in fear all the time of being disfellowshipped. And the leaders of the church, basically their church was made up of Father, Son, and Holy Scripture. And there was no place for the Holy Spirit in that church, and no place for grace, or no place for a personal relationship with Christ. Because if one of the students, let's say, wants to know, who should I be dating? He'd go to the elders and the elders would tell him who to date. Or they'd go to the elders and the elders would tell them where to live or who to be a roommate with, because the elders knew
There's no imagination. There's no
nothing. It was a
play.
complete cult.
I
And
know
so,
exactly what that is.
yeah, so we got out of that church, but then we knew a lot of people in the church already who were hurting. So we started to have a Bible study on Friday nights, and these people started coming to our home for these Bible studies. And we just started looking at God's word on some of these issues. And we could see the healing taking place when people were taken out of this very rigid rule. It was, it's maddening because it's so subtle. Because on the surface, this looked like the perfect church. But when you get closer to the center, you could see just the rot that was in there, because these people saw an opportunity. Maybe they didn't even see it. They fell into an opportunity to be in control of other people. And that is a natural human tendency, to want to be in control of other people.
Hmm.
So ever since then, I've always looked for a church where the church is Jesus centered, and the teaching of the church is what matters is your relationship with Christ. Try to keep that relationship as pristine as possible, and then be in relationship with other believers in as close to the home as you can get. So we're always in a church where there are a lot of home groups. So we're part of a home group. We support each other, pray for each other, help each other through hard times. And so we're part of the body of Christ. And then we have this relationship with Christ, and we learn about him through his word, but also through spending time with him. I don't know. Maybe I said too much.
No, what? We're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Say too much. No, it's like so much of that I recognize, right? Because that's what it is. That's where I grew up. That's right. That was ground zero for me. Uh, And it's like, the challenge I have is I don't like I get why like like LGBT people have like this thing that they want to always constantly like pick at, you know, with the church. I understand. I understand why the church does what it does. It's not there to, you know, to to elevate a little piece of who you are. You know, it's for the whole world. I get that. So it's like, but I can sympathize with like the people that want to go like to that one, why that one thing, like change that one thing. I get that, because I don't have the feeling of like you need to change. I want the church to change for me, but I understand that feeling because my worry, I don't know if it's a real one, I think it's real to an extent, is that the church expects me to change who I am. Now it's not like, of course, that why wouldn't they? Right? I mean, why if what would be the point if they didn't have like certain expectations, a bar to meet? But my worry is that, you know, that one thing that makes you you, we're going to take that, right? Because because how do we know if you're really committed? You know, it's kind of like the Abraham and Isaac thing. And it's like, is that what I'm going to be expected to do here? Like, just give it. It's, you know, that's that whole thing that I'm thinking about. Like, that's why I go there. I really like it. And then the walls close in. And then I'm like, yeah, I'll take a break. All right. Right. Anyway, it's not really a question. I just like you're showing me that you have recognition of some of the things that I went through. So
Well, I mean, what you just said now really resonated because I can remember when I was first a new believer. I became a Christian when I was 30. So I already had a lot of my own patterns developed and everything. And I came out of a completely non-Christian home, so I didn't know what was what. But I was in a Bible study, and I think we were in the book of Isaiah, and we were one of the things I loved about my very first church was we had these amazing Bible studies. It was just a little country farm church, and yet we could take a book of the Bible, 5 or 10 of us together, sit around, and there would be one person in there who maybe knew a little something, but mostly we were just letting the Spirit lead, and we were digging into this book and trying to figure out what it was saying and what it was saying to us, and we were looking at the history of it and trying to understand it ourselves, and just had these amazing Bible studies. But anyway, in one of these studies, all of a sudden I had this, maybe they brought up the issue of being willing to sacrifice your time. And I realized that for me, that was like a major thing, asking me to sacrifice my time because, you know, I was a young mother and at that time we had a farm. And so I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and we'd milk the cow and I'd be separating the milk and the cream and getting everything away, put away in the freezers and fixing the lunches for everybody. And then we'd go off and work a full day and then come back drive home from the city and feed the hogs and bed down the, you know, just all of this kind of stuff. And then with all the garden produce and canning and, you know, and like my life was morning to night, busy, 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 busy. And then they're asking me to sacrifice my time. And there was this little thing in me that was like, you know, I remember that feeling, but I also remember just this peace and love kind of flowing through me, like if you will give me this thing, I will make something beautiful out of it. So I think there are times when Christ asks something of us, but it's never intended to be a diminishment of who we are, but rather it's intended to make us more of who we can be. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm not there yet.
Well, it's a supernatural thing. I don't think it's something that we can think our way into. I think it's that if you have some area where you feel Christ is asking you to give it up, then I would just say, just really talk to him about it and see if your inclination is correct. You might be imagining something because of something someone else said or some look that somebody else gave you, thinking this is something I should be giving up. But if it's really something Christ is asking you to give up, he will make it very clear to you, and he will lovingly show you what he can do with it. Because I don't think he ever takes anything away that he doesn't make it into something more beautiful.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I've definitely been in a position, especially lately. Well, yeah, I'm not going to talk about I'm not going to talk about the cooties situation but like there's like some trauma I've had about that, the events of the last 3 years, that I can tell I'm being called to. You're gonna have to let it go, man. Like it's, that thing you want. It's not coming from a good place inside of you.
Mm.
It's you. What you want is peace, not vindication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so that part I can understand, but because of this thing that happened to me in my past, where I was
Mm-hmm.
being asked to not be a person,
Mm-hmm.
right? That most beautiful thing that you've ever done, and the part of you that is able to make actual beauty, and that's the only thing. Now you're gonna have to stop doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, that's made me standoffish about you know belonging to any given community. Really, I don't know how long I'd stay on a sports team. Like, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, well, I
thanks
mean,
for.
this is one of the horrors of toxic communities is that I'll tell you one more little story if you have a minute.
Yeah, yeah. I got all the time in the world. My wife went hiking up a mountain. I got the whole evening to myself.
Um, there was a time about maybe 15 years ago. We were living in a bigger house. We had more room. And I was at a women's group at church one day, and I was in the restroom and I ran into this woman, and she said, "Oh, you're Karen. Your husband is so and so." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, he and I used to be in a Bible study together." And so we got to chatting, and she seemed so nice. And she said something about being um, temporarily homeless. And back in those days, I was a big-hearted person, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" I said, "We have an extra bedroom. We could put you up for a few weeks until you get back on your feet." And so she moved in with us. But it was a little bit like Bartleby the Scrivener. After 9 months, she's still living with us. And not only living with us, but she sort of took over the house basically because she made herself, um, she was kind of ahead of the woke curve a little bit. So anything that I would ever say, like in terms of when you come home late in the evening and cook in the kitchen, it's perfectly fine with me if you use the kitchen, but I'd like you to clean up after yourself before you go to bed, because otherwise I wake up in the morning, I've got a baby to take care of, the kitchen is a mess. Oh, I'm feeling threatened now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, right. And anything that I said to her, it didn't matter how gently I tried to talk to her about living within some sort of boundaries in the household. And because I'm very sensitive by nature, I didn't want to hurt her. And so I would back off more and more and more, trying to be kinder and kinder and kinder. And she just kept taking more and more ground
Yeah.
until finally it came to the place where I'm basically living upstairs in the bedroom with my daughter. And she's got the whole run of the downstairs of the house because I didn't know how to manage her. And if I would talk to my husband about it, he would say, "Well, you're imagining things. She's not like that at all. When I see her."
Ah. Oh, she was a sneaky one.
And then she would say things to me like, God sent me here because I can see you and your husband are having problems. And God sent me here to heal your marriage. And in my head, I'm thinking, the only problem with my marriage is you. But I didn't have the courage to say, you've got to, you've got to leave. I didn't know what to do. And somewhere along the line, somebody gave me a book on toxic people. And I read this book and I thought, oh my goodness. So then I called the pastor of the church that she said she was a part of. And I said to him, so and so has been here with us for 9 months. And isn't there somebody in the church, else in the church that could help her? And he said, oh, you've been had. He said, she's run through everybody in the church in the same way. She's done this to everybody. And he said, honestly, the only way to handle this is to, the next time she's out of the house, put her stuff out on the front step, change the locks, and let her know that her stuff is out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds cruel. And I hated doing it because it made me feel like a monster. But in the end, that's what we did. And she never came to pick the stuff up. So eventually we moved it over to the side yard and we contacted her by phone and we said, the watering system comes on every other night. And so if you don't pick it up, it's going to get ruined. So she finally came and got it out of there. But the impact that that had on me is it made me not want to help anybody with anything ever again, because I felt like I would get sucked into that vortex because I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to draw an appropriate boundary where I'm still loving, but I'm also holding them to account for what they're responsible for. And it took me years to work through that. Years. And every time I'd bump into somebody who was needy, I would just turn into like this hard shell. And I
Trauma.
really hated what
Trauma.
it did to me.
Yeah, it's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's like I don't need levitation and projectile vomiting to believe in demons. Like I just need that story, right? And how else are you gonna like banish that from your life, but to be somewhat monstrous, right? Like, yeah, and that's traumatic because it's taking your good thing inside of you and just like weaponizing it, just like I'm gonna make it bad, right? I'm
I
gonna,
never thought about that, but that's what Jordan Peterson says all the time, that the way to really damage a person is to to take what's best in them and how did he say, when they do something good, punish them when they do something good.
yeah,
And that will really destroy a person.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah, that's a terrible. That's terrible that happened to you. So, but did you find a way to be able to thread the needle with that and be able?
It's just been time. It's been time.
Yeah.
And being in small groups, sometimes with people who were needy and having to step over that threshold and try to meet their needs. And I went through a time where I did some, what do they call it? It's a kind of therapy, but it's just with lay therapy. Another person in the church who was familiar with the book Boundaries spent some time going through the book Boundaries with me so that I could work through some of these issues and
Oh,
talk
I
to them
see.
about it.
Okay.
And then really it's just taken time. And it's probably only been in the last couple of years that I've started to feel a freedom again, where it's not like I'm forcing myself. I wanted to continue doing the right thing, but so many times it was with this great fear and trepidation and anxiety all wrapped up in it, right? But now I'm getting to the place where I have a lot more freedom in it.
Hmm. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
So, I mean, there is healing. The song will call you home,
Yeah.
but but it isn't always immediate.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it depends on how deep the rut goes.
Yeah. Was how far you're lost, right? Takes a long time to go find that soul.
I mean, I think about you from the time you were 3, these people had your mind until you were in your 20s. That
Well, it's the time I was 0,
okay.
just totally
Yeah.
100% born into it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I, I mean, I mean, it just makes me want to cry for the little boy that you were and could have been and didn't get an opportunity to be. And that, and that could color your frame of the whole of Christendom. That's the really tragic, infuriating thing about it is how many churches, not just the cults, but there are also many churches that do the same thing, that
Hmm.
exercise control over other people.
Yeah. Well,
Because the beauty of what Christ does, I believe, the beauty of what Christ does is that he makes each one of us more individual than we are to begin with. I'm way more of an individual now than I was when I became a Christian. I was a completely undifferentiated mass when I first became a believer. And Christ has made me into an individual with all sorts of unique thoughts and ideas and opportunities and um,
hmm, cool. Well, it's a hell of a promise. I got there like through my like interest in the ancestors. I've had very um, niche spiritual interests. I'll call it that way. And my foray into the ancestors, that's what as part of the healing process, right? Because there's like multi-generational spiritual healing that needs to be done. And then I realized, oh shit, all my ancestors are Christian. Not all. Eventually, you go way back, they're not. But um, so I was like, well, if I'm if I'm to heal this whole ancestral thing, and then like my father, there's a whole my parents, there's a whole Christian trauma thing with the conversion that happened. So it's like I got like the whole ancestors, the whole ancestors thing was like, you like it or not, like you're gonna have to deal with this Christian thing. So what are you gonna do with it, right? And things are reassuring if Tolkien's a Christian. Well, you know that's pretty cool. Right? He didn't have no imagination. So there's definitely some tutelaries there. Yeah, yeah.
did you ever read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis?
No, the only thing by C.S. Lewis I read was the Screwtape Letters.
What did you
That
think of them?
So I like Screwtape Letters. I tried to read Mere Christianity because everybody's always going on about it, and to go from Screwtape to Mere, it's like going from like 'cause Screwtape's very playful,
Mm-hmm.
and then Mere is just very blunt.
Yeah,
So I didn't finish Mirror. I was like, it just felt like a guy telling me his opinion. And I was like, Screwtape he was playing, right?
yeah.
It's
Well, you'll like Great Divorce.
okay. Yeah.
It's only about 60 pages long.
Okay.
I think it's a good book to read about every 3 years, kind of
Okay.
reorient yourself. But it's about the divorce between heaven and hell, and it's a
Okay.
little fictional book. It starts out in hell,
Hmm.
and then the people in hell go on a holiday to heaven.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating little book. And in all the characters, I always find that I see myself in all these characters, these people that are living in hell.
That's the best books are that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they kind of reveal to me where I don't want to end up when I get older. I don't
Right.
want to end up being like those people, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm already like them, so I have to mind my P's and Q's, you know.
Right, right, right.
So anyway, I think you'd like that book
Okay.
too.
I'll take the medicine as the doctor prescribes. Yeah,
I
definitely.
understand what you mean about mere Christianity. It's much more of a, it's not exactly an apologetic, but it's yeah.
It's
He's tried to boil down Christianity to something that would be palatable to everybody from every denomination and
yeah, it's a
show you
guy
what,
saying what he thinks, which is it's
yeah,
cool, but
although if you want to hear what C.S. Lewis really thinks, I think you want to read Abolition of Man,
hmm,
because in that one he's much more in many ways prescient about the way the world is today.
hmm,
That book could easily be written today about what's going on in the woke world and academia and all of
hmm,
that. Um, but it's a considerably more challenging read than Great Divorce. You can't just read it for nighttime reading. You have to really put, I mean, for me at least, I'm not smart enough to read that one for nighttime reading. I have to really focus on what he's saying in there to get it. But once I got it, it was like, oh wow. Um, but speaking of apologetics, you mentioned one thing that you thought would be interesting is music as an apologetic. And I thought that was kind of an out of left field combination. So I wondered what you meant by that.
well, that's Drew's idea. Drew kind of just threw
Mhm.
that thing at me, and he's gonna have a better grasp of what all that is. But it's it's been true for me because I set out with this intent of exploring music, meaning, and mystery, and it took what maybe a year for when you start tugging at mystery. It's like how quickly are you going to find yourself face to face with the greatest mystery, right? Which is which is God, right? So it's an apologetic. I mean, what does apologetic mean really? Like, what is it? It's making a case for something you already believe. Is that what it is?
Um, that's a really good question. I think I think it comes from the verse, um, in season and out of season, be prepared to give a reason for what you believe.
Okay. Okay, I see. Well, we'll have to ask Drew what he means because
Uh-huh.
that's his little nugget there. But
Well, I mean, when you said the phrase, what popped into my mind was that because I tend to see the world symbolically, meaning that one of the things that got me through a really difficult traumatic time in my life was learning to see everything in the world, every created thing in the world, as a way of seeing through that thing to God.
hmm,
So taking a tree seriously and really looking at a tree and observing the characteristics of the tree and being thankful for every aspect of the tree and looking at a tree all the way down to the cell level and the molecular level and trying to understand what really makes a tree and see that God inhabits all of that and that God is the mystery of the tree. God is the majesty of the tree. God, you know, so not that God is the tree, but that every created thing in some way inhabits God
mm-hmm,
and that God inhabits every created thing so
yep,
that he is all and in all.
mm-hmm,
So I tend to see the world that way. So if I think about music that way, then I think you can begin to contemplate music as a way of seeing God,
hmm,
the 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 way that music happens and the structure of music and all the complexities of music and all the beauty of music and all of the chaos that can be in music, and yet you can find meaning inside the chaos, and that you can see the structure of the whole universe inside a piece of music, in the same way you can see the structure of the whole universe inside a tree. So everything becomes an icon of the whole. And so music seems that way to me, that music itself can be an icon of the whole.
Hmm.
Does that make any sense at all?
So hang on. Yes. But so there's more. I think I think maybe I'd expand it because I would say, yeah, it's an icon of the whole. The whole is more like music than music is an icon of the whole. I think there's a writer, Hazrat Khan. He's a Sufi writer. Um, Drew's read some of him too. I'd like to know what he's got to say about it. Um, he wrote a there's a book. It's a series of his writings or something. It's called Music of Life, and he's got a really keen way of explaining how it's all music. Dante does this too. Dante does it too. There's a place in Dante where he's asking maybe Virgil or somebody, like, he's in like a paradise place. It's not in the third book of Divine Comedy, but it's in the second book. But somehow they end up being in a paradise place, and he actually says like, uh, "How can this be?" kind of a thing. Um, don't expect a Pajot level of analysis here. I'm just a dude reading Dante, but it says kind of things move. The whole world moves. It's animated.
Mhm.
And it more or less as it moves, it rubs up against the the place where God lives. Sort of like that. And that makes a sound. So, and if you think about it just like in terms of friction, every friction makes a sound. Every movement is a sound. That's what sound is. It's movement. So it's animation. It's life.
Mhm.
Everything that is animated, which is if you're a God person, that's everything, makes a sound. It's that's what it is. It is sound, right? So
Mhm.
it's more like this is where we live. It's the music. It's a song, right? And in a way, literally, like actually, not, oh, this is a poetic way of putting it. It's animated, so it sings a song. So I kind of see it as like music. If you pay attention, I think it tells you it it tells you to believe in God. I think. I don't. I think if you like, you're being, if you're sincere and you're honest and you kind of get out of your own way, if you really pay attention to what music is, you can't not believe in God, I think. So I guess like an apologetic in that sense, like it makes God inevitable if you're really paying attention. And
Don't you
just like,
think that's true of all? I mean, I agree with you, but isn't
yeah.
that true of almost everything?
Well,
That if you're really paying attention,
yeah. Yeah.
really paying attention, there's no place to go
Uh-huh.
but to believe.
Right. But I'm a musician,
Yeah.
so that's what I pay attention to.
Yeah.
And it's my domain, and that's where I have a degree of responsibility to do something, right?
Mhm.
So if
Well,
I
and,
was a
and there's
biologist and
there's a great, absolutely great scene at the beginning of in the Chronicles of Narnia. The seventh book that Lewis wrote was actually the prequel to the other six, and it's called the the I can't remember the name of it. It's the prequel. It's the very he wrote all the six books of the Chronicles of Narnia, and then he went back and wrote the book that explained what all the rest of them were about. And that's that book. I can't think of the name of it. But in one of the scenes in there, they're observing the creation of the world, and God is basically singing it into existence. And so
yes,
there's this description of this
right,
song that brings the whole world into existence, and it's such a powerful scene. It's
yeah.
just amazing.
If I'm not mistaken, in the Silmarillion, Tolkien also has that idea of this that the world was sung into being. The world's a
Mm-hmm.
song, and it's once you start seeing it, it's like everything has a rhythm. The
Yeah.
seasons, night, day, the migratory patterns. It's all goes by rhythm, right? And Hazrat Khan is basically saying you get just pay attention to yourself and the way you're gonna be well, like healthy, is by being in rhythm, right? If you're off rhythm, then it's not gonna go right. So that's like again relationship. That's what music is. It's a relationship, especially when you're playing with other people, right? Um, you can.
Well, and music is also the spaces between the notes.
Mm-hmm,
It's, it's not so much the notes as the
mm-hmm,
spaces between the notes, because what differentiates one melody from another, even you can have the same melody, you can have the same notes in a melody, but it's going to be a completely different melody if the amount of time in between each note is different between the two songs.
mm-hmm,
So even the relationship between the notes is where the music resides. and and then the relationship of, like in a symphony, the relationship of all the different parts of the symphony and the way that they come together, they form a, I can see it in my head. I don't know how to describe it, but the impulse of the sound pushing against the other sound, there's something that happens in between the sounds that
mm.
is where the music is connected and connects to us. And
Friction.
right, and then that sound is also experienced as a impact on our um, eardrums and all the other little parts inside the ear. So it's the relationship. It's always the relationship, and it's always, I think everything comes down to this whole relationship idea.
Mm,
I really think marriage is kind of at the base of everything,
mm,
because marriage is these two unlike things coming together. And there's something that happens in between the two that is something better than what either one can be by themselves. And and of course the Bible is written as the marriage between Christ and his bride, and his bride is the body. And so um yeah, marriage is at the base of everything, and music is a kind of marriage, because it's a union,
mm-hmm,
the union between the music and the listener. It's a union between the musicians playing with one another. It's a union between the composer and the musicians.
mm-hmm.
There's so many different unions that have to take place there.
I wonder if that's why bands generally don't work out because they're a marriage is two people and babies. You know, you can have like a good marriage with multiple people if the extra ones are children, but like not number three, four, five. You know, so I wonder if that's like why bands ultimately are just fall apart, or they stab each other in the back. And obviously, I'm sure there are bands there that have like always had a good relationship, but like really, typically, bands are really, really notoriously tough to keep together.
Well, an insight that just came to me, I think it's an insight anyway, is that one of the interesting things I learned when I was studying creativity and art is that, especially when you're doing non-objective art or abstract art, there's a big problem in providing unity to the piece because you have this combinatorial explosion of all these colors and shapes and sizes and everything going on. The thing that brings unity is dominance. One thing has to be dominant over the others, not in the sense of hitting them over the head and telling them what to do, right?
Yeah.
But in a painting, that which is dominant takes up maybe 80% of the painting. So let's say, for example, your painting is 80% warm and 20% cool, then that cool part will be much more visible to everybody than it would have been otherwise, because this 80% warm part kind of provides a background or a support or an encouragement to the dominance is the strength and the support for the minor part. So the little minor part is the focal point where everybody looks, because that's different. The different part needs a dominance to support it. I think that also, I mean, this is like a Pareto principle issue, but I think it also is part of the reason why, and I know this is a horribly controversial thing to say, why the husband is supposed to lead in a marriage. Because what it really means for the husband to lead, partly, is that he takes the responsibility for everything so that the wife can shine. And I think that dominance has just been misunderstood in a major way, because dominance is supposed to be the support, encouragement, strength, underpinning. That's what the dominance is. And in a band, you have 4 or 5 people and everybody wants to be equal. There's nobody to make a final decision.
Yeah.
There's nobody that has the ultimate responsibility. How can it hold together? I just don't get it.
Yeah, I used to think I was upset with Paul because he was lazy, for making rehearsals, and just because he was lazy, he wouldn't rehearse as much as necessary. But the reason I lost my band is because I was the leader and I was gun shy in taking that and assuming that responsibility, because I was playing with musicians that were virtuoso musicians playing in symphony orchestras. And I'm just an Acadian boy scratching on a guitar, holding together with glue. That's how I learned. And I thought like, oh, I'm not supposed to be the leader. But the fact is that I had a I had a skill that they didn't have that made me the leader, which is inexhaustible imagination. Right? And that when I lost my band, I realized, oh, I had more in the fuel tank because of that. And so you're describing, and that's I think you can extrapolate that as if you fail to take the lead in your marriage, it's like, do you want an equal marriage? Well, do you want to not take the lead in your marriage and not have a marriage? Right? It's or
Well,
just
and because you also understand that part of taking the lead is a huge sacrifice.
yeah.
It's not like, oh, I get to take the lead, I'm the winner. It's not
Yeah.
that at all.
Yeah, and even in a band, it's I would actually, because they're virtuoso musicians, it's better for me to just mostly do less and let them shine. But that it tricked me to thinking, oh, they're the leaders, so I have to constantly be waiting for them to take the lead. But that's
Hmm.
that's not what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to not do that much, like lay these foundations for them to kind of take off.
Hmm.
And that was leadership, right? But
Yeah.
I didn't understand that. It's a level of maturity I didn't have. Yeah. So the mass, last thing, the mass, one thing I haven't been able to really talk to uh, people about much. I read in McCullough's History of Christianity, Diarmaid McCullough, he's an Anglican guy, Anglican historian. He wrote a history of Christianity. And one thing that stuck out with me is that there was a period in history, I don't know which one, where the times that the mass was being said started to multiply. And it became like super popular. And the churches would like say a mass like multiple times a day. And so there was like a time crunch admin thing that they needed to figure out. So they decided that they would make some masses low masses and they would have one high mass. And so the low mass they decided we're going to be able to get through it more quickly because we're not going to sing it. But the sung mass was reserved for high mass. So when you sing something, when you sing a worship, it makes it higher.
Hmm.
That's resonates with the shaman thing. He can't get there without the song. He can't just like go there. There needs to be a drum or something. There needs to be that music. It's the music that takes you all the way up, right? All the other stuff still need to be there, but if you want to make it all the way, it's music. Now, obviously, I'm biased because I'm a musician, right? But I just want to slide that in there, right? That
And my first question is then did people quit going to the low masses and only go to the high mass, in which case everybody crowded into that one high mass every week?
it's actually true because a lot of these masses were being said with no audience because they were just doing so many of them. And I think it was like something to do with times were especially bad, so they wanted to do more or something like that. I don't really remember, um, but yeah, definitely the and that's one thing have experimented with was singing my prayers.
Hmm.
I don't do them all because it's supposed to be reserved for a special thing, but give that a whirl,
I did
right?
actually for a while. I started doing that, and well, I think I had some idea of actually writing songs around the Psalms. So I would pray the Psalms, but I would sing them, but with my own melody.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, the
that was
Jews
meaningful.
do that, when they read the Torah, it's kind of like a sing-songy thing. And the one Orthodox church in town that I've tried here, they do that. Um, the I went to a Catholic church a couple times, and um, it was just at a time where that priest was leaving, and they had a new priest, and the new priest was singing the mass more. And then I tried Latin mass, and then they completely sing the mass, right? There is a difference. There is a difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely there's a difference. Um, I'm biased towards the musical prayers, of course, but
Mhm.
yeah. Mm.
What did you think of the Latin Mass?
So
Well, I'm just asking out of curiosity. I've never been to one, but I have heard a lot of people talking recently that since the church reinstituted Latin Mass, that church has become way more meaningful for them.
Yeah. So I definitely prefer it. Um, I still have a deal with the wall closing in, right? But there's some things. It's a ritual. From
Mhm,
where I'm coming from, that's more my language. Whereas
mhm,
the regular mass is more like a worship, I would describe, which they both are, but
mhm,
I don't know why that word works better for me. Whereas the
mhm,
Latin mass is there's something about it that's it's like um it's like a technology.
mhm,
There's some the way so they have a choir, they're on point. There's a specific language, specific words, um, and it's like I'm watching like a grandfather clock going because the it's longer because they take more time in the micro movements like so the altar boy can't go from here to there and he has to specifically take a route but before doing that he has to swing the sensor a certain number of times it's like really like a formula and it's like none of the altar boys can cross the altar without turning and kneeling and doing all this stuff and there's only the priest can walk up the front directly towards the altar. Everybody else has to be pointing from the side. It's like all these little details that are like it's very ritualistic. It's a ritual and
mhm,
it's designed in a specific way. And if these pieces were moved, I really get the sense like that they would do something different. It's like hyper intentional.
mhm,
And even the people that go, there's more of that going on too. There's less people, but they they gave me a booklet there, and there's like a pre-mass if you want to go that far. There's certain prayers you have to do to prepare yourself for the ritual, right? So to
mhm,
me, it's more like a ritual than people coming together and saying they love God. And I'm not ranking them,
mhm,
right? It's just because of my where I've been through this, the paths I've walked. I understand one more than the other, and there's less trigger points in the Latin Mass for me
mhm,
because I don't understand as many of the words,
mhm.
right? Um, so it's not going to bring up as many of these memories that I have that I'm dealing with. But yeah, plus like they burn incense and a lot of it, and so there's more of your head body involved because the scent does something to you,
Mhm.
and it's a specific kind of incense, right? And so yeah, there's
It also sounds like it's one of these things that generates attention. You have to be hyper focused in terms of
yeah,
your attention
yeah,
because of all the details and everything. So
yeah, for sure.
I know recently a lot of people have been talking about how attention, properly focused attention, really is like prayer or is like agape.
Hmm.
It is worship. I mean, somebody posted a picture on YouTube of Christ standing in a group of people, and the light is shining up on their faces because they're all standing there with their iPhones. Christ is right in the middle of them, but they're all looking at their iPhones.
You're right.
Um, so attention is a form of worship.
Right.
So, um, Yeah, I can see. I think I'm going to have to try that out. That really sounds fascinating.
Like the regular mass is like regular, like, and there's like more babies and the people participating in the music, uh it's a bit more inclusive. They're it's like they're the peoples that might be training possibly someday to go to the Latin mass, should they ever ascend to that level or something like that. um and it's a bit more, the wires are hanging out and it's a bit more messy, and people get there in their jeans or shorts, and it's got more of a, this is for the the tax collectors and prostitutes mass. It's for let's just like scoop everybody in, and like we're gonna have an old, good old worship to God. It's just we're gonna bring you there, right? Whereas the Latin mass feels a little bit more like, uh there's a maybe a higher level filter or something like that, right? But I don't know. What do I know? I went like to four of those things, so
Mhm.
I'm just kind of, uh,
Well, it's great talking to somebody like you who is exploring. You have an intention to find truth, and you have a heart that wants to experience
yeah,
truth and wants to experience
healing.
Christ's love, and yeah, and to
Yeah,
be healed,
yeah.
and that's what we all want, you know. I will pray for you.
Oh well, thanks, Karen.
I'd ask you to pray for me because um no situation is perfect, and no church is perfect, and no fellowship is perfect, and we all struggle to to hear the song that calls us home, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So we can just
Well,
pray for each other that we can have ears that are open to hear the song.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. This has been great. Really
Oh,
good
well, thank
talking
you
to you,
so much.
Lizzie.
It was great for me too, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It was like even way more good than expected. So, yeah,
I feel the same way.
you're a great conversationalist, and I like your YouTube channel. I'm gonna try again the whole physics thing, and do it like
Well,
you.
maybe to start, take the simple one where I talked about love being the one rule,
Okay.
because I kind of, there's
It's about
two.
that.
Yes, it's about
Okay.
that. There's two of them. I'll link to them in the description section. There's one
Okay.
where Michael and I had a conversation about Wolfram when we first discovered him. And so, are you familiar with Michael? He's been
I
on Grail
listen.
Country a
I
number of times. And
I listened to 4 episodes, I think, so far. Drew, Grim Griswold, that
yeah,
guy is a cool
uh-huh,
dude.
yeah.
Um, oh, there was one obviously about that classical pianist. Obviously, I listened to that
Oh,
one.
Sandra, yeah,
I may not have finished because I listen to while I'm working,
yeah.
but and then sometimes I get interrupted, so I have to stop, and then I can't remember where I'm at. So, but yeah,
I
and
have a
then
couple of other music ones early in my YouTube channel too, with
mhm,
Travis Woyan. I think you'd
yeah,
enjoy
okay.
him on music. He's really
Yeah,
interesting
well,
guy.
I'll be definitely catching up slow by slow
Yeah.
over the next few months. Yeah.
I'll throw some of the music ones into the description section on the video when it publishes, and also the two on love being the one rule, because I think that's an easy way to slide into Wolfram's ideas.
Okay.
Um, I don't understand the physics either. I'm just hanging on for dear life in some of these things,
Yeah.
trying to get a grip on it, because I see something of value there, and just trying to understand how it all fits.
Cool. Yeah.
But this has been so great, and I hope we can talk again sometime.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd
Yeah.
be great. Yeah.
I'm going to have surgery on November 8th, so I'm going to
Yes.
be out of commission for like a month or so. So
Okay.
I probably
Okay.
won't be back doing YouTubes again until December.
Okay,
you
I
know?
understand. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
hope it all goes well and you recover quick.
Yeah, I don't want my soul to be, how do the shamans put it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't
Have
want to lose a
have
piece
my
of your
soul
soul.
separated from me, and although I understand that feeling because I remember vividly other times I've had surgery, it does feel like something is missing from me.
Hmm.
It The recovery time is a challenge because of, pain and things like that, but it's also a challenge because somehow I guess I used to use the word mojo. It's like your mojo goes away.
Yeah,
The motivating factor, the thing that gets you going, that fills you with joy and all that, it just seems like it's very hard to access when you're in
yeah.
that space.
You know, one thing my wife found some podcaster, I forget. I'm gonna try to get her in an interview where she talks about she has this theory of the nervous system or something. She says the music gets you out of fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
feeling. So if you have a lot of trauma or you're just in a funk or something, try singing your way out of it. And we've tried it because my wife has like chronic illness issues,
Mm-hmm.
and now we sing every single day. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It's not a performance. You're not a pro. You're not in a band. You're
Mm-hmm.
just, it's medicine. It's medicine. So you have to do it every day, right? It's the same as like your prayer or your rosary, whatever religion you are. You know, consistency. You have to eat every day, and you have to sing every day. You have to sing every day.
Well, I have a song for you to try on one of your days. It's called "The Untitled Hymn" by Chris Rice.
Okay,
I
I'll
don't
check it
know if
out.
I don't know if Chris Rice wrote it, but I know he sings it. But it's
Okay,
called "The Untitled Hymn,"
okay.
and I can't tell you how many times I cried my way through that song
Hmm.
in times of healing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a tremendously healing song. So,
Okay.
the Untitled Hymn.
That's great. I got lots of homework. C.S.
Yeah.
Lewis, music to listen to, podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I'll put all this stuff in the description section so others can follow along.
Yeah, I noticed on your YouTube channel you got a bit of a culture of commenting, so that's great. I'm looking forward to reading everybody what they have to say. I don't. You can say anything, like even if it's like you think I'm just a crazy person, I'm fine with that. I'll read anybody what they have to say. I'm curious.
I love my commenters, man. I just have wonderful conversations with my commenters.
You
So,
do, yeah.
yeah, super. Okay. Have a great evening. I hope
Oh,
your wife and you have a wonderful evening and you find a good song to sing tonight.
okay, thank you. Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.